Have you ever heard a story that sounded so terrifying, so unnatural, that you almost wished it was just a made-up campfire tale? Tonight, I'm going to share with you 3 true horror stories that still send chills down the spine of the people who lived through them. They are real accounts from real people, the kind of experiences you hope will never happen to you. So, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and make sure you're somewhere safe. Because once you hear these stories, you might find yourself double-checking your locks or wondering about that shadow in the corner of your room. Story 1. The passenger who never paid. I've been driving for a rideshare company for almost 5 years. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but it pays the bills. And most nights are pretty uneventful. But there's one ride that I'll never forget. It was a rainy Tuesday night, close to 2 a.m. The streets were nearly empty, the kind of quiet where even your own car feels too loud. My phone buzzed with a pickup request, just a couple of blocks away. The location was odd. It was near the edge of town, where the streetlights become fewer and the houses start to look abandoned. Still, I've had late-night pickups from sketchy areas before, so I didn't think much of it. When I pulled up, I saw him. A tall man in a black hoodie standing perfectly still under a flickering streetlight. He didn't wave, didn't move, just stared at my car until I rolled down the passenger window. "Ride for Daniel?" I asked. He nodded once, slowly, and got in the back seat without saying another word. His presence felt heavy, not in a physical way, but in the way the air felt charged, like the moments before a storm. As we drove, the GPS took us farther out of town, toward the old industrial district. This wasn't unusual. Some people worked late shifts out there. But something about the silence made my skin crawl. I tried small talk. "Long night?" Nothing. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and that's when I noticed something strange. His hoodie was completely dry, but I'd seen him standing in the rain. His hoodie was completely dry. But I'd just seen him standing in the rain for at least 30 seconds before he got in. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he had just stepped out from somewhere covered, but the unease stayed. We drove for about 10 minutes without a word. Every so often I glanced in the rearview mirror. Each time he was staring straight ahead, face shadowed by the hood, hands resting on his knees. He didn't check his phone, didn't look out the window, didn't fidget. Nothing. The route took us past the last working streetlight into a stretch of cracked asphalt lit only by my headlights. On either side, tall, dark buildings loomed, old factories, long since abandoned. Finally, the GPS said, "Your destination is on the right." I slowed to a crawl. The destination was an empty warehouse with shattered windows, no lights inside, and a rusted chain-link fence around it. I put the car in park and turned slightly in my seat. This is it?" He leaned forward just enough for me to see his mouth, pale lips curling into the faintest unsettling smile. Then he spoke for the first time. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." Story 2. The Locked Room. I used to work as a night security guard for a mid-sized hotel. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was easy money. Patrol the hallways, check the cameras, and make sure the guests were safe. Most nights were uneventful. The strangest things I dealt with were drunk tourists or guests forgetting their keycards. But there's one night I still think about, and I wish I didn't. It was a little after 1 a.m. when the front desk phone rang. The receptionist, a young woman named Kelly, answered. I saw her brow furrow, and she looked at me. "There's someone in room 617, she whispered. "But that room's been locked for years." I froze. Room 617 was on the top floor, at the very end of the hall. The room had been sealed off after a guest died in there under suspicious circumstances. The official story was a structural issue with the ceiling, but we all knew something was off. I took the service elevator up. As the doors opened, I immediately felt the temperature drop. The hallway was dim. One of the lights was flickering. When I reached 6 to 17, I heard it, The sound of someone walking inside. Slow, deliberate footsteps. The door, which should have been bolted shut, was slightly ajar. I pushed it open just enough to peek inside. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the city lights coming through the window. And then I saw her. A woman in a faded red dress, standing in the middle of the room, facing the wall. Her hair was long, matted, covering her face. She wasn't moving, at least not at first. Then her head began to turn. Not her body, just her head, rotating slowly, until she was looking directly at me. Her eyes were pure white. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut. I ran to the elevator, but the hallway felt longer than before. Like no matter how fast I moved, the end wasn't getting closer. By the time I made it downstairs, I was drenched in sweat. Kelly saw me and went pale. You went up there?" she asked. "Yeah, why?" She turned her computer screen toward me. The call log from rooms 6 to 17 had come in exactly 1 hour after I'd gone upstairs. The problem was, my entire trip upstairs and back had only taken about 3 minutes. So where had I been for the other 57? Story 3. The Voice in the Drain. When I was about 12, my family moved into an old farmhouse in the countryside. It was the kind of place where the nearest neighbor was a mile away, and at night the only sound you could hear was the wind through the trees. The house had a large, damp basement that I hated going into. The walls were made of old stone, and there were strange stains on the floor that no one could explain. One evening, after dinner, my dad asked me to go downstairs and grab a jar of pickles from the storage shelf. I groaned, but did it anyway. I was halfway down the creaky wooden stairs when I heard it, a faint whisper. At first, I thought it was just the wind coming through the tiny basement windows. But then I realized the sound was coming from the far corner, where an old metal drain sat in the floor. I took a step closer, and the whisper became clearer. It was a woman's voice. "Help me," she said. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Again, the voice came, this time more desperate. "They locked me in here. Please." I backed up slowly, my hands shaking, and ran upstairs. I told my parents, but they brushed it off as my imagination. That night, I couldn't sleep. At around 3 a.m., I heard the voice again, except this time it was coming from the vent in my bedroom. The next morning, I refused to go back down there. My dad finally decided to check the drain himself. When he pried off the rusty cover, he found a small, dark tunnel that led under the house. It was too narrow for a person to fit through, but it went deeper than his flashlight could reach. Later, we learned from a neighbor that the farmhouse had belonged to a man in the 1950s who was suspected of kidnapping women. They never found the bodies. We moved out a month later, but sometimes, when I'm in the shower, I swear I can still hear her voice in the pipes.